Hello, Maria. Welcome to
Hello,
Function.
Danuli.
Welcome to Function First Care podcast. So nice to have you here. So you are a wonderful, very experienced occupational therapist, and we met last year, I believe,
We
uh,
did at the
at the
VRA.
yes, at the Vocational Rehabilitation Association conference,
Hmm.
and I was actually talking to one of the board of trustees from the VRA, and kind of like really speaking passionately about, sort of non-pharmacological, holistic therapy and treatments, and like, really saying, kind of like, really emphasizing the importance of it and for clients. And then she said, I know exactly the person that you should be connected with today. She's wearing a lovely flowery dress, so I'm gonna like signpost you over to her. So yeah, we met, and and you were the one of the highlights of that day for me. So yeah, I'd love for you to kind of start by introducing yourself and sharing a little about your background and what led you into nature-based work, and yeah, just kind of summarize your whole kind of, experience around occupational therapy and kind of what you sort of do now.
Okay, thank you, Danuli. It's a pleasure to be here. So, I am Maria Morris, and I'm a naturepreneur and founder of Your Own True Nature. So, as you say, my background is in occupational therapy. I qualified in 1989. And then I was working within the NHS, and unfortunately, I had my own accident at work. So I was assessing a client seated on a metal stool, and the leg sheared and went up inside itself. I ended up landing on a concrete floor, and I ended up rupturing several discs in my spine, having some paralysis and spasms in my legs. Long story short, within 9 months, I had avoided spinal fusion. I had pulled in all the stops from all the colleagues that I had in private and NHS health settings. And at the time, I was married, and we also had a complementary health practice. So I used a whole raft of rehabilitation to get myself back to work. And at that time, vocational rehabilitation was just coming into the UK. So I decided I couldn't go back to work into the NHS because the job demands were too much for me at that time. So I decided to pivot my career and retrain in the world of vocational rehabilitation and ergonomics, which I did. And as I say, I've then taken on further training, and I also do vocational expert work as well now. So in 2021, I'm pleased to say that the VRA gave me an award for my practitioner work, particularly with helping people with complex injuries and acquired brain injury. And they included injured military personnel, and PTSD and so on. So I was able to help people, I am able to help people to return to work at 3 times the national average, as a result of all of the tools that I've gained over the past 30 years or so. So, in terms of the nature-based work, so like many people, as a child, I was more outside than inside, often climbing trees and making mud pies and planting herbs in my little garden and eating my herbs with my food, running around, playing outside. And then after my injury, when walking was initially difficult, I used nature very heavily to help with my own, not just physical recovery and energy recovery in terms of the stamina that I needed, but also my own mental health recovery, because obviously when something is taken away from you, I thought my career was going to be always within the NHS, and then it suddenly wasn't. It wasn't a great space to be. So it helped within my own recovery. And I wanted to find out more. So eco or nature therapy was just coming more and more into the fore in the UK. So I did some further training. And that was around 16 years ago now. So since then, I've used all of my tools, but my nature tool, as I call it, across the NHS, within the NHS, also within injured military personnel setting, with charities, with companies, with individuals, and in community settings. So, as I said, I combine nature-based therapy with my 30 years experience in truly holistic health, productivity, and human performance to help people to heal, to reset, and to gain what I call a calmer body and a clearer mind, to realign, to give them their best possible, most meaningful life, career, or business. So, one of my clients once said to me, I helped him turn his tragedy into a victory. So obviously, someone's life may not be exactly the same as it was before injury, but you can still turn those tragedies into victory. So that's what I like to do.
Oh wow, that's beautiful, Maria. And I love that you use your own lived experience to really, make a meaningful difference to your clients. So
Mhm.
for those who are unfamiliar with it, what exactly is nature therapy or ecotherapy? Can you go into detail about that?
Sure. So, ecotherapy is a therapeutic approach and it uses a very structured connection with nature to support or promote our mental, physical, and emotional well-being. So, it blends evidence-based therapeutic methods with outdoor or nature-based environments. So, one of the leading experts in ecotherapy is Dr. King Lee, and he describes it, and I love this description. He describes it as a bridge, something that opens our senses and reconnects us with the natural world. And people might know eco or nature therapy as forest bathing or Shinrin Yoku or green therapy. It's been called vitamin N or vitamin C, SEA. And the one I like most is the Natural Health Service.
Mm. Nice. And you mentioned it's an evidence-based approach. So
Sure.
for those who are skeptical of the
Yes.
approach, like
Yeah.
um, what would you say to them? And can you also explain kind of how you use and if you do use outcome measures to with this intervention
Sure.
to evaluate your intervention and to see what like
Yeah.
benefits it has and
Sure.
yeah.
Okay. So there's lots of evidence. So first of all, it's not my particular belief about using nature. It's not woo-woo. Um, it backs up my own personal experience and that of my clients. Also, to start with, it's not new. So you probably know that humans lived as hunter-gatherers for 12,000 years. So there's lots of different research and models that explain eco or nature therapy. So, for example, E. Wilson has a biophilia theory, and he talks about being nature literally within our DNA because of that early hunter-gatherer experience. People may have heard of Howard Gardner, who talks about multiple intelligences. So you can be good at maths or art or languages, and our naturalistic intelligence is another one of those multiple intelligences. Tony Buzan, people might know him for mind mapping, talks about in our 10 geniuses. It's lovely that we've got 10 geniuses rather than just one. So he talks about our sensory genius, which nature activates our sensory genius because it is very multisensory. And in terms of people like Dr. King Lee, so to give you the background about eco or nature therapy, Japan introduced Shinrin Yoku or forest bathing back in 1982. And the reason the Japanese government did that and set up several national forest parks within Japan is because I think two-thirds of their country is covered in forests, which is a great start. But it was mainly because the Japanese have a very dense, intense population, and they work extremely long hours. And a combination of those factors were driving ill health stress, and sadly, self-harm and suicide rates up really high. And what they did lots of studies with Dr. Kingley, taking people, stressed out executives, people with heart conditions, all sorts of things, out into the forest, doing lots of studies and researching what happened to them physiologically and what happened as a result. And one of the things that they realized was that the trees release something called phyton size, and they support our immunity and help to calm the nervous system. In addition, more and more in modern life, it keeps us indoors. So I said as a child, I was more outdoors than in. Obviously, I'm an adult now. I still like to be outside and I'm thankful that I can be, but many people spend a lot of time still indoors. So, for example, Americans are spending around 93% of their time inside, and Europeans are spending around 90% inside. And what are we glued to? We are glued to our screens, we are glued to our phones, and they're now calling it techno stress. So, The Lancet, the medical journal, The Lancet, recently called sitting the new smoking. So nature gets us moving, it restores our attention and it reduces stress and other diseases. And I've got specific research on that that we can come on to. So you mentioned outcome measures. Yes, I use outcome measures. So Dr. Kingley has the mood of profile score. I take a variation on that. I can also use, there's a variety of therapeutic scores that I'm familiar with. So if it's back pain, you could use a back pain, scale. If it's mood score, you might want to use a GAD-7 or whatever, or a HADS scale. There's all different scales that you can use according to what the client has. But I tend to use a general one. So if I'm out and about with people who haven't got anything specific, they just want to know whether something's worked. I always ask people at the start of a session how they're feeling and to self-rate. So I get them to choose a typical symptom. So it could be, are they feeling tired? Are they feeling overwhelmed? Are they feeling anxious? Are they feeling low in mood? Are they feeling angry, irritable, frustrated, unclear, bit foggy thinking? Whatever it might be, I get them to rate it. I get them to rate it on a scale of 1 to 10, or I get them to use like a traffic light system, a colour system if they can't use the numbers. And then after the session, I get them to re-rate it again. And when I talk about a bit later about some cases and clients that I've worked with, I can give you some of those results. But I would say at least 9 out of 10 in the clients that I see have a significant change in that one thing that they want to see change, either within that session or within 48 hours, or the longest might be a week. There's and often it's instant. More often than not, it's instant. So from the start of one session to another, and again, I've got some client stories to share with you on that. So that's just some of the outcome measures that I use.
That's absolutely incredible. And what would you say to kind of people within the case management world, expert witness world, um, you know, if they're not familiar with this approach and
Uh-huh.
intervention, like what sort of advice would you give, in terms of from your lived experience and from your own experience of supporting
Mhm.
clients and having seen such positive benefits, like
Mm.
how could where where could the professionals actually who are supporting clients where would they start really, if they said,
Mhm.
what, I just know nothing about this, like
Mm.
I want to
Mm.
be able to have an evidence-based approach to really
Mm.
advocate for my client around this and
Mhm.
recommend it within my reports, like, but I just don't know where to start. Like what would you say to
Sure.
them? Perhaps we could even have some resources within the bio of the podcast to kind of signpost people to. That would be amazing. But yeah,
Sure.
what would you say to them?
Okay, well, I would say just look at the evidence. That's one thing. And yes, I'm very happy to share resources and so on. And I'll come on to when you ask me what's new a bit
Yeah,
later on.
yeah.
I'm actually considering providing some resources to people. That
Excellent.
came to me this morning when I was before I logged on and was out in the garden. So look at the evidence is the
Yeah.
first thing, and I can share some resources. And I would also say feel it for yourself.
Mm,
Okay, so at the end again, I'm going to give people some hints and tips to try what, some what I call nature invitations, they're called, invitations to experience some of these methods yourself.
mm,
So, for example, there's yet more research. So, I absolutely know that the University of Bournemouth at the moment is currently looking, for example, at how each tree type affects somebody physiologically. So they are putting like a brain cap with electrodes on. They're measuring heart rate variability. They're measuring blood pressure. They're taking physiological measurements, and then they're doing before and afters of people going out for different lengths of time in nature. You've only got to look at town and urban designs. That more towns and future town design is incorporating this biophilic design into towns. So, for example, just 10 more trees in an urban area has an impact, has a researched impact on health and happiness for the residents. So that's researched. You've only got to look at the amount of forest schools coming into more into play, particularly for children who are neurodivergent, with autism, ADHD, all of those sorts of things. Phenomenal results for all children, but particularly for those types of situations. And again, if you look at Finland, which has been deemed one of the happiest and healthiest places to live globally, they have more and more time outdoors. So that's another, it's not just a made up statistic.
Mhm.
So, in terms of how I've worked with some of the skeptics, for example, I worked in a mental health unit. And when I first got there, I was at the ward round, and the consultant psychiatrist asked me to spell ecotherapy. How do you spell ecotherapy? So I spelt it. And around a year later, I had taken clients, nursing staff, psychologists, occupational therapists, OT aides, all sorts, as well as clients, the GPs, and in the end, the consultant psychiatrists, two of them, because their clients, their patients were going back to them raving about the results they were getting within my sessions. They wanted to experience it for themselves. And I also helped that particular unit to win an award of funding to get them a sensory garden built alongside. They just had like a little outbuilding, so that people could conduct their sessions more outside. So that was how powerful it was. So it's not an alternative. It's a complementary, evidence-based, and increasingly part of social prescribing. So, whereas GPs may prescribe you to have some gym sessions or swimming sessions, personal training sessions, whatever, they are now writing green prescriptions for people going out to nature.
Wow.
And
That's
some of that is replacing or reducing medication.
that's absolutely incredible. It just shows you how powerful nature is, isn't it, for
Absolutely.
our healing. And speaking of how powerful it is, you mentioned that you came into this path from lived experience of what had happened to you.
Mhm.
Um, could you speak a bit more about what that was for you in terms of that intervention, like what that process looked like?
So at that time, there was nothing called vocational rehabilitation, or I certainly didn't have any access to it. Obviously, you have a certain amount of time paid sick, which I took. I hadn't hardly taken any sick leave prior to that accident happening, and I'd been in the NHS. I was a clinician, but I was also a manager of a service. So I had staff responsibilities, I had student, I was guest lecturing to various students. And I had been working for 17 years when that happened to me. So, as I say, I was fortunate enough that I was working with my husband at the time. I'm now divorced, but we were working, we had a complementary health practice. So we had access to other forms of pain relief and obviously I did take some medications, but we were also very much into naturopathy and complementary health, vitamins, supplements, all of that. But I also had access again through contacts. I had access with Harley Street clinicians, so I did a lumbar strengthening program as well. But I also was very much outside. I had a garden. I couldn't sit for very long, but I could kind of stagger around the garden, or I could lie down. So within nature, and again, I will mention this a bit later as well, there's something very beneficial which they are doing more research into, which is the grounding method. So, and I've experienced this with clients I've taken out. So I've got an exercise I do called the majestic tree exercise. And one of that part of that is that you lean against a tree. And you can do various exercises, nature invitations with that exercise. However, this one particular woman, and I know because I've experienced it myself, she leaned against the tree and she went, wow. And this was only after a few minutes. And she said, the backache that I've had for 6 weeks has just gone. And it's all to do with the magnetic pull of the earth and the fact that the grounding of the tree. And also, you get the same experience if you walk barefoot,
Mm.
or if you don't want to walk barefoot. I struggle with walking barefoot because I've still got some sensory loss underneath my right foot. So I can quite happily walk on glass and not feel it. So as a result, that's not great from a safety perspective, partly, infection risk and everything. So what I have to do is get those little slip-on kind of water shoes if I paddle or whatever. But I've also got some grounding shoes that I walk out in nature with. So it's like I'm walking barefoot. I can still feel the ground, and it's still supportive to my leg, but I won't get any glass going into my foot. So I use barefoot shoes for walking,
Me
summer and
too.
winter. Yeah.
Yeah, they'll
So,
bond a lot.
but you can also get so you can lie down on the floor on the grass and get the same benefit. So particularly great if you're enjoying a picnic. It's always good to lie down. But also you can get grounding sheets. So I've got lots of clients that have also gone out and researched various grounding sheets that
Mm,
you can have that benefit, particularly if you're not sleeping well.
mm.
So you can stay grounded at night. So it goes underneath your bedding and you still get the benefits of the grounding energy. But again, they're doing research into that. But I know it works for a lot of people. So yeah.
That's amazing. And why do you believe that, connection with nature matters so much for our health and well-being and day-to-day function?
hmm
Why do you believe that, that
why do I believe it?
yeah, why do you believe that, obviously from your lived experience, and how long ago did that happen to you, that injury?
So it was 28 years ago.
Mm,
I was just 30 when that happened.
yeah.
So in terms of if you want me to come on to more about the research that backs up again, because I am like you, research and evidence based, I
Yeah.
think that makes sense. So I mentioned before, it does all sorts of things. So obviously stress we've spoken about, and I'll come on to that, but it does things like lowers your blood pressure.
Hmm.
So, for example, they've done studies where if someone looks at the colour green, their heart rate goes down. Now, if you think about the intensity and variety of greens in a forest or in nature, then it magnifies that benefit, for example. With stress, they've done studies where they've shown a 76% immediate relief in stress reduction, a physiologically measured relief that's lasting. It's not them kind of thinking, they've actually measuring it. And within the soil, so when you get your hands dirty, the soil have got microbes that actually boost your mood. And the studies have been done, for example, at Bristol University to prove that. And as I said, more trees. The University of Exeter have done studies about more trees means less depression. And I love this one. So the Woodland Trust, which is a charity supporting woods, obviously, they call it tree laxation.
Love that.
So isn't that amazing? So, and as I said, just 10 more trees in an urban area makes people feel as good as if they've
Wow.
had a £10,000 pay rise or they're 7 years younger. That's how
Wow.
they've measured it. And people often say to me, "Oh, Maria, you're a tree hugger." And there's this big joke about tree hugging.
Yeah.
It's actually not a joke. And I've just said to you about leaning on a tree.
Yeah.
And the reason is it actually helps you to release a neurobrain chemical called oxytocin, which is a natural tranquilizer. So
Wow.
when you connect with that tree, but again, so similarly, not just trees, but with the sea. So I'm fortunate I'm by the forest and by the sea. Sea air has negative ions, which are also mood boosting. And as we know, and I've got in my background, the colour blue helps also to calm our brain waves. So if we want to work in conjunction, so the green helps our heart rate go down, and the blues, such as the sky or the rivers or the sea, helps to calm our brain waves down. I mean, that's a powerful combination.
Mm,
And we've already mentioned the grounding, and that again helps to stop and rebalance that fight or flight reflex we often have going. So you're always on the go, always on the go. So your nervous system never switches off, particularly when you've got all this techno stress we were talking about.
mhm,
And again, so I like to give people examples because people relate to people, don't they? So, for example, I had a CEO come to me of a business, and unfortunately, he was in a mental health crisis situation. He was self-harming and at risk of self-harm, serious self-harm, and his team were underperforming. So I helped him and his team get back on track. Most of it initially was using breath work and nature, and then I moved on to other things to help him deal more effectively with his anxiety and his depression and what to do to avoid that escalation of emotion.
mhm,
So, and one of the things, talking about grounding, that he used, I encourage people to have their own, what I call a wellness toolkit or their own grounding tool. He went out for a cycle ride. He hadn't been doing anything really. So he managed to get out for a cycle ride and he found a conker under a tree. And he picked up the conker because he absolutely felt it was his conker. It was something he could hold, it was concrete. And
mm,
it was also a neuro-linguistic prompt to remind him what to do. So he put the conker in his pocket, he had the conker by his desk, and of course it lasted, quite a few weeks until he was able to get something else. But for him, that was what helped him. And his feedback was, I literally saved his life.
wow.
But obviously, due to client confidentiality, I can't say who
Mm,
that was.
of course.
Unfortunately, that's a problem, isn't it? Gathering testimonials, a lot of people don't want people to know that
Mm,
they've been in that space. So it's
yeah.
very confidential.
Mhm,
But also, similarly, the Me University, MIE, found that these phytocyanides that I spoke about, particularly D-limonene, which is like a lemony one that it emits, reduces work-related stress by 41%. And you might have seen for people with dementia or memory problems, it improves your memory by 20%. Great if you're studying, or really got to have a good memory for things. And as we mentioned, it boosts your problem solving by around 42 to 50%. So if you've got a problem you want to deal with or look at, think about it logically,
mm,
keep it in your mind's eye, and then either look outside or go outside or get outside. And within 24 hours, you will have a much better solution. Also, in terms of pain, so I mentioned my pain. So when this first happened, it was excruciating. It was the worst pain I've ever had in my life. I had full issues with pain, spasm, and then when the leg spasm came back, particularly like when the bedding was over my leg, I had to put something across the bedding to keep the bedding off my leg because it would just shoot out, and it was excruciating. So I thankfully know a lot about chronic pain management anyway. But using nature has a direct link to boosting pain management because it also impacts on your mood and helps you to focus on all of those pain control methods. So through doing a combination, I was able to use that.
So,
Also,
sorry to
yeah.
interrupt. On that pain management,
Mm,
before we go off
mm,
track, I really want to uh,
mm.
hone on this point.
Okay.
What can you elaborate a bit more on the pain management bit and how can people use nature to alleviate their
Okay.
pain?
So, for example, with back pain, people with back pain are 6 times more likely to have low mood or depression, and vice versa. That was an Australian study. So, if you think about that, the similar chemical effects impact mood and pain, your pain receptors, or how you perceive pain, then if you can use nature or other tools, but particularly nature, to help manage, and it's all about rebalance. Remember, we're trying to rebalance. You are then more likely to be able to put into practice any of the other pain management techniques that you might use, which then also means that you might sleep better because being in nature helps you to sleep better. And they've proven that about 15 to 20%. So it's a vicious cycle. If you're in pain, you don't sleep because you go to pain, like I did. I would go to bed thinking I'm exhausted. I need to sleep. But the pressure of the duvet or the blanket on my leg would cause it to go into spasm. And of course, then you're waking up half the night. So as I say, a vicious cycle. So if you can break that cycle, and if you can, the analogy I like to use is the waves don't necessarily stop coming in life, whether that's pain waves, whether it's fatigue waves, whether it's immune system stuff, whether it's anxiety, depression, whatever it might be, whatever your particular wave is, or it could be a whole load of the waves. But what nature does and what these techniques do, these multi-sensory nature-based techniques and tools do, is you learn how to ride those waves. You learn how to get back your equilibrium faster. So it's not to say you don't still have them. I still have leg spasm now, and it's like 28 years later.
Mm,
Okay. And it's triggered by particular things. So I can manage it because I don't trigger it in the way that I know will trigger it. However, it still happens. Not as bad as it did, obviously, all that time ago, but I know now how to better manage it and how better to get my equilibrium to manage my pain better.
mm,
And a lot of that is to do with one, it's walking, which obviously I will do outside. And two, it's grounding. So it's actually feeling the feet because it's helping those nerves to re-stimulate and re-regulate. All of that. All of that. It's very, very powerful.
So it sounds like for people experiencing chronic fatigue or
Yes.
burnout, and like you said,
Yes.
anxiety, depression,
Yes.
uh, a mix of all, um,
Yes.
that actually sort of doing what you explained would really
Yes.
help to alleviate um,
All of it.
all of
All
it.
of
Yeah.
it. All of
Yeah.
it. Absolutely.
And
All of
actually, you're
it.
right. It is like a vicious cycle.
It is.
If you can't sleep properly, then the pain is more exacerbated,
Mm,
and it just keeps on going, that cycle, doesn't it?
mm,
And so,
absolutely.
you mentioned about neurodivergent individuals,
Mm,
and how it can help, um, neurodivergent individuals around kind of their sensory
yes.
systems. Could you sort of speak more about that, either
Yeah.
from the research or working with clients or both? That would be great.
Sure. Okay. So there's loads of research again. So I will put some of the research. There's loads of books. So there's an association of forest bathing. There's the Forest Bathing Institute. Florence Williams wrote a book called The Nature Fix, and in there she talks about 6 minutes in nature gives you health benefits lasting a week, for example. But there's also specific chapters and studies that are being done with people with neurodivergent needs or PTSD. As I said, I mentioned I worked a lot with injured military and they had complex needs as well as PTSD. I've worked with colleagues who are neurodivergent and I've worked with clients who are neurodivergent. And I think we're all kind of on the scale at some end or another, aren't we? So that's what they're saying. So it's getting back to that balance. So quite often, overwhelm, overload is a huge issue, particularly with work, with screen work. It's that techno stress. It's how to deal with all of this, as I say, overload everything coming at people. They often can mask it. So I've got lots of clients that are still functioning well at work, but they're actually masking and they're finding it a burden. So it's how best to help them to decompress. So all of this work is particularly helpful for everybody, but particularly for them. And as I say, that's why a lot of Sen schools are setting up with the forest school work, particularly the children finding benefit in that. And there's a really good book out at the moment. So for many years, I've been doing a workshop called How to Get Your Daily Dose, which is dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. And there's a book written, I think it's a top seller at the moment by TJ Power, and it's called The Dose Effect, and he's a neuroscientist. So he talks in more detail, and I'm very pleased to see one whole chapter, if not more, all about nature as part of that. So I highly recommend that for anyone that wants to. And he does it in a really easy to understand and explainable way. And it backs up everything I've been doing in the past however many years. So that's great too. So yes, I would highly recommend people who have got that to, once they switch off, or even I'm going to give you some hints and tips. You mentioned how to incorporate this in a busy day.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing is to how to have those pockets. My friend called it pockets of bliss, which I love. So pockets of bliss throughout a day that can help you reconnect and rebalance and realign.
Hmm. So how can busy people at work or if they're working from home, wherever
Yeah.
they're working from, how can they sort of
Hmm.
ensure that they are putting in those pockets of bliss? Like any tips for
Yes.
people out there?
I've got lots of tips.
That'd
So
be great.
I would just start with, and research backs this up, that if you've only got a minute, then a minute is better than nothing.
Mhm.
So some is better than none, basically. They have done some research about the best length of time to do nature-based work to get the most amount of benefits. So ideally, what they suggest is 4 to 5 hours a month and a 2 to 3 day digital detox immersed in some shape or form in a nature-based activity at least once a year. So that's kind of the nature prescription in an ideal world. However, we're not living in an ideal world, so I want to give people things they can do in at least 6 minutes, 1 to 6 minutes. So the first thing starts with the breath. So the easiest one to remember is the one used by the naval seals, and they're the divers. So the one of the easiest to remember. There's lots of apps, there's lots of different techniques, different ways, but I start with this one because it is easy to remember. So all you've got to remember is the number 4. So if you'd like, I can talk you through it right
Okay.
now.
Yeah.
Okay. So all you need to do, if you feel tired, anxious, overwhelmed, just need to kind of stop and recenter yourself, whatever it might be, then you can sit for a moment. Make sure that your feet are on the floor, or if you're standing, that you're standing up, or if you can, lean against a wall because that's solid, or even better, if you can lean against a tree outside, that's even better. But if not, we'll just assume you can't. So you can close your eyes, and I'm going to do it too because it helps me to relax and that helps my voice to relax too.
I'll do it
So
with you.
close your eyes, okay? And I want you to just take a slightly deeper breath in through the nose for the count of 4. Then you're going to hold that breath for the count of 4. And then you're going to release it through the mouth for the count of 4. So that's the first cycle is in for 4, hold for 4, and out for 4. So you're just telling the body and brain and mind to just stop for a moment and just breathe. And then what you might want to do is just to place your hands gently on your belly button area, because most of us only breathe from the top parts of our lungs and we don't do the full belly breath. So if you imagine like your lungs being a balloon, so you're just going to do what we call belly breathing rather than all from up here. Okay. So in order to help you to feel that, if you can't connect with that, then it might help you just to put your hands on your belly button area and to just feel and sense what's happening with that breath. So again, in for 4, hold for 4, and out for 4. And then you can add something else. So I've mentioned this previously. So we know that the colours blue and green calm us down.
Mhm.
So one of the things you can do is we can bring in the colours blue and green, and we can think about our favourite space in nature. We've all got one. It could be the garden, it could be somewhere you've been on holiday, it could be a view that you're looking out from your window, it could be something that just comes to mind. Doesn't matter what it is because the brain doesn't know the difference, okay? So, but it's important that you have the blues and the greens if you can. So this time, when you breathe in, we're going to bring the colour in, but we're also going to bring in, when you breathe in, you're going to say to yourself, I'm breathing in calm. for example, if you're feeling anxious, or it could be any word you like, whatever word works for you, or I'm breathing in light, or I'm breathing in relaxation, whatever the word is. And then on the out breath, you're going to say to yourself, I let go, I release, okay, or whatever again. Whatever works for you. Okay, so you're going to bring in the color and you're going to bring in the words with your nature image, your special space in nature. So we're going to try that. And then there's one more layer that I'm going to add on in a moment. So just try that in a moment. So we're going to breathe in. So you're breathing in calm or soothe or relaxation, whatever that word is. Thinking about the colors blues and greens and your favorite space in nature, holding it for the count of 4. And then this time when you breathe out for the count of 4, you're going to say to yourself, I release, I let go. Again, whatever works for you. And just really see it, sense it, feel it. That's the important part. Okay. And then this final layer, it's something in neuro-linguistic programming. So it's a bit like when you press the save button on your computer. So this time, when you've really generated that feeling of calm, you can press your thumb and your first finger together a bit firmer than you would normally. And that is just what we call an anchor to your brain to remember this feeling of calm. Okay. And then what you can do, that's it, but you can just have it gently on your lap. What you can do is you can, whenever you're feeling that sensation, the more you practice this, your brain and body and mind will associate this practice. When you press your thumb and finger together, guess what? You get that instant result without doing all the breathing even. If you practice it enough, and ideally at least once a day, for a few moments, doesn't have to be long. There's always going to be a time when you're just maybe reading something or whatever, or just looking, gazing out the window. There's always going to be a micropause moment you can do this. Okay. So
Love.
let's try that last time. Should we just try it last time? So breathing in calm and relaxation, thinking of your special space in nature with the blues and the greens, and then holding for the count of 4, and then breathing out, releasing and letting go. And this time pressing your thumb and finger slightly firmer together. So you're anchoring that feeling in. And then when you feel ready, coming back into this space.
Wow. Thank you so much, Maria. I instantly feel amazing, calm,
Okay, so that's one.
relaxing. Yeah.
The other thing that you can do is again at times in your work day, presuming that you'll have to get up, make yourself a drink or get some water, keep hydrated. So you can do something with a glass of water or whatever it is that you're drinking. So I've got a mindful cup of calm exercise, and if you're anyone listening to this or viewing this, I'll tell you at the end how to get in touch with me. If you drop me your email, I can send you a 15-minute recording and a doodle sheet as to how to use what you're drinking in a mindful, relaxing way. So that's something you can easily incorporate. The other thing that's really easy to do is they've shown that the morning sunlight is particularly powerful for us. So if you can maybe log on, or maybe while you're getting your drink, or just before you log on, if you can at least open the door, open the window, and if you can find the sun, great. If not, if you can just imagine that beautiful sunlight coming in or that fresh air coming in, and just do some of that mindful breath work, that will really help you. Or if you've got a day full of online stuff, meetings, usually try and schedule in at least a 5-minute break between them, and just maybe open the back door or the front door or a window, get some of that fresh air in, get some of that sunlight in. So the other ways you can do it is bring nature indoors, you know. So I'm surrounded, I've got a beautiful orchid here that a friend bought me. I've got my own terrarium. They also have proven that the biophilic design, bringing nature indoors, helps the air quality as well. So that again helps our oxygen intake for our work. So bringing nature indoors. And I mentioned looking out of the window. There was a study done in a hospital actually, and they couldn't figure out why patients sitting near the window or opposite the window were healing and recovering faster than those that were facing a blank wall.
Wow.
And basically, they put it down to the pine tree that people were able to view. And as a result of that, when you go into hospitals and clinics now, more and more you'll see nature photographs, artwork, people being near windows, simulating windows. And it also, the amazing thing is that the brain doesn't know the difference. So you can simulate a nature image. They call it soft fascination. So if you have that like sunset image, or if you have a morning sunrise, or something that really, really attracts all your senses, that will have the same effect. So people in hospitals that connect with nature more and more recover faster. It's
Wow.
been proven.
Everyone's gonna want that window, that window position in hospitals then.
Absolutely, absolutely. And
Um,
the other thing with the so we mentioned the color blue. So another quick thing. So again, during your work day, I presume you get up, you might wash your hands after you've used the toilet facilities, or if you're making a drink or something. When you're washing your hands, or brush some water on your face. Imagine as the water's running down the plug hole, that color blue, that calming, you're releasing, letting go. Or if you're having a shower, you're releasing and letting go of the day. And imagine, close your eyes and imagine your favorite water-based place, sea or sky or whatever, or, kind of. And if you want to energize yourself, if you're feeling a bit tired, then the color would be orange. So think about the yellows and the oranges of the sunset, and how you feel with the warmth of the sun on you. Yeah, so if you need to energize, it smells like lemons, which energize you, and thinking about the yellows and the oranges. So again, in my office, I have an ionizer, which helps to keep the air like I would be by the sea. So it helps to help with those negative ions. I also use an aromatherapy diffuser. So I use a lot of different scents because they give me different things. So if I need to relax, it's more lavenders, for example. If it's more, I need more energy, it might be a lemon smell or a pine smell, like in forest bathing. But there's different scents that you can research, and aromatherapists can advise you on that as well. So that's just a few little ways that you might want to try. One quick one. If you do get a lunch break, they call this the sit spot, but you can do it standing up because quite often, if I've been sitting, I want to stand and walk. So it doesn't matter where you do it, but you have to be ideally outside. So you sit or stand outside and you use all your senses, and it doesn't matter what order you do this in. But the key thing is you've got five senses. So it could be five things you can see, four things you can hear, three things you can touch, two things you might smell, and one thing you might have tasted recently. So you use all your senses and you do that for 5 to 6 minutes.
Love that. These are such a brilliant tips, Maria, and they're all free.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I was just going to ask, if you talked about visualization and to
Mhm.
try and sort of imagine some of the colors through
Mm.
your day-to-day functioning. If people have difficulty with
Mhm.
visualization, would
Yeah.
you recommend kind of like looking at sort of
Yes.
at something on the phone to kind of like sort of prompt our brains to
Yes.
generate that
Absolutely.
visualization? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. So, what I would do with people is everybody's different and we've all got different key senses.
yeah.
So, if somebody is more for touch, I'd encourage them like that CEO I mentioned who had the conker. So they might want a coin, or they might want
Yeah.
a pebble. I call them positive pebbles. You can collect a pebble and decorate it to remind you. Some people like crystals. So people have different things that they use to remind them, to
Yeah.
prompt them. And I also help people to make a calm card. So the
Yeah.
calm card can be a hard copy, like a credit card size that they have on them, that they have beside them. So one of the things I have is I call them nature snacks. I go out to nature, I take photographs. I get people to choose a nature snack and see how it makes them feel. But you can look at your own photographs. Choose one that really, really makes you feel joyful, calm, inspired. Print it out as well as having it on your phone. Have it by your desk, have it by your bed, have it by the fridge, wherever you're going to see it. And that will again prompt you to do some of these exercises.
Right, so people can even use sort of a colored card, for example,
Yes,
to sort of like
yes,
visualize that color in their mind.
yes,
It
exactly.
doesn't necessarily have to be their phone where it emits
No,
blue light, or
no,
it
no,
can be
no.
sort of anything to that kind of can prompt you to have the
Yes,
brain to have that
yes.
visualization of the color.
And also,
Okay.
I've worked with people where they're very much texture based. They might have
Yeah,
like a silk piece of fabric, or they might have some beads that they like to
yeah,
fiddle with, or they might have some music that they like to listen to. So I also suggest the music that they've shown is most relaxing is classical music. And I also, I do paint. I'm an artist. So when I paint, I use solfeggio music, which is relaxing brainwave music. And again, there's different solfeggio tones. I've got colleagues who are music and sound therapists who also back up the research for all of this, where they actually helps to calm the brain down. So I use as many different senses as I can. So use all the tools in your books, but if you resonate more with one than the other, then use what works for you.
yeah. Thank you so much. And at the start, actually, you mentioned about being an occupational therapist,
Mhm.
and I wanted to kind of know what that means for you, because we've had a previous occupational therapist on Function First Care. So if you were to explain it to people about what occupational therapy means to you, what would that
Mhm.
be in a nutshell? Especially with what you do now in your
Okay,
business
so the
work.
better thing I can do is I will explain it verbally, but for those that can see a visual, I like my props.
Yes,
So
please.
I've got a prop here, and it's basically I'm going to describe it first, and I'll show you. So it's a carved piece of it's a slice, should I say, of carved natural wood. In the center of it is a person, a figure, a wooden figure, and it's like a jigsaw puzzle. It fits inside the space of the tree, the wooden tree shape, and above it, naturally carved in the wood, is a heart shape. So what I will explain to you is that's the piece of tree. So I'm holding up the tree slice and I'm just fitting in the figure now so that you can, for those that can see, it fits together. But most people feel disconnected from who they are or where they are. So that's what I help to do, not just with the nature based, but it's also about the environment. So it's about looking at your internal environment and your external environment and matching them and harmonizing them. So that environment could be your physical, it could be your mental, it could be your emotional, it could be your spiritual environment. It could also be your outer environment, could be your home environment, your work environment, your wider circle of friends and family, or your community, and whatever is needed to unify that or help you to unify that. So it could be, for example, in the workplace, reasonable adjustments. So it could be equipment, it could be practices that the employer can help you with, or it could be at home, it could be a piece of equipment to help you manage a particular daily living task, for instance, or it could be another way, perhaps having a buddy to help support you, an enabler to help you access the community if that's what's needed, or to help you to complete some of your work tasks. So it really, it's wide, like just like my little wooden figure. It's really arching. It's really spreading. So it's like a huge spreading oak tree, shall we say? I do a lot of work with oak trees. And so it's kind of all encompassing. So it's a bit like my symbol is for my business is the tree of life with a Viking compass in it, which means you're always safe and protected and never lost. But there's also a person within the tree trunk. So that symbolizes as above, so below, so within, so without. And it's also rainbow colours, which mean that it's all the colours of the rainbow, means it encompasses everybody and everything. But it also means that they are energy centers. So I'm also trained in Reiki. So we connect a lot to our energy centers as well. So that's why I've designed my logo the way I have.
Wow.
But certainly the foundation, the roots of me and what I do, and I've known what I wanted to do since I was 13, was to be an occupational therapist, and that's what I trained in. And those are my roots. They give me my solid foundation for the rest of the training and everything else that I've learned over the years to then branch out literally into other things and help clients in many different ways.
Wow, Maria, that was such a beautiful, wholesome way to describe occupational therapy. And why did you want to become an occupational therapist from the age of 13?
So it was that time in my school when they were starting to talk about what careers, because obviously we were doing at that time GCSEs coming up. And my mum actually, she bought me a careers book, and she gave me the careers book. I kind of had written a few little ideas down. And there was a section in there. I knew what I didn't want to be, and quite often, and again with clients, quite often you start with what they don't want to do. Because quite often it's easy to say, well, I don't want to do that, and I definitely don't want to do that. So you start off with what you don't want to do. And I knew I didn't want to be a nurse because I hated needles. I had a fear of needles. I thought, I'm not doing that. I wasn't very good at chemistry, so I thought I can't be a doctor. So my skills and interests at that time were art, we're writing, we're educating. I was training other children at the age of 4 and 5 how to read in my class. So I've always been educating. I helped my father with his business from the age of 7 with marketing and business because he didn't have a very good English education. So I helped him design adverts. So I was always very entrepreneurial in that sense. Um, but I also knew I wanted to enable people rather than to care for people.
Mm.
So I really wanted to help. I loved planting little seeds in my garden. So again, I love planting the seeds of helping people to then grow and blossom to be the best they can be. So in the careers book, there was physiotherapy, radiography, art therapy, speech and language therapy, all the kind of allied health professionals. And I was really drawn to occupational therapy because it was so, at that time, overarching. It covered all my interests. It covered, the mental health side, the physical health side. You could work in schools, you could work in prisons, all of that. So I then was lucky enough to have a teacher who had a second home down in Devon, right next to the then School of Occupational Therapy. So she wrote to them and said, I've got a student who's interested. Can you send us some information? So they sent me some information. I then started to do Saturday jobs in helping in various therapeutic environments. So I helped with riding for the disabled. I helped in hospitals and I worked as an OT aide the summer before I went to do my university training. And I applied to 3 different places and I ended up being one of the youngest students in St. Loy's at the time, which it was. It's now retirement flats or something. So I was one of the youngest students because they said I'd shown dedication to the profession from such a young age.
Wow, you're a great OT ambassador, and for any listeners wanting to have either a career change like me, or wanting to find out what they want to do as a profession, then please do consider occupational therapy because Maria summarized it in an excellent way. Um, so Maria, you mentioned about kind of working with people who've had trauma, PTSD, people in the
Yeah.
military. Can you talk a little bit more about kind of how nature has helped people with trauma, PTSD?
Mm.
We know that there are loads of trauma-informed approaches now, for example, EMDR
Hmm.
and other modalities. But how have you seen nature as an intervention really benefit people with to sort of work with that trauma,
Okay.
PTSD. Yeah.
So I use it in a particular way. So it's easier to explain some examples, I think.
Yes, yes.
Um, so And it depends where I am with that client. So sometimes I will work online and I've got quite a lot of nature-based props that I will bring in
Yeah.
and I will bring nature to people. Sometimes they can be out in nature and I'm on the phone to them, or I'm on the phone to them first, then they might do some nature-based work and then I phone them back.
Hmm.
Sometimes they will join me and we have a face-to-face session for at least an hour, hour and a half, usually 2 hours. So it really depends where they choose that to be, and I leave that for them to choose. So, for an example, the injured military work I did, I was based at in Surrey at the time at Headley Court, and they've got beautiful gardens. They've now moved their centre to the Midlands, but they have beautiful gardens there. So quite often the military don't like being indoors because most of their work is outside, or certainly the people that I was seeing were. My caseload was the neurological and the complex, including PTSD, injured personnel. So I recall one particular person who was a pilot and unfortunately had an acquired brain injury, which meant that he could medically no longer be a pilot. And a lot of the military join young, and it's all they've ever known. So for them to transition into something that's totally unknown is pretty scary, even though they don't admit being scared. It's pretty frightening. So, and particularly for people who are in what I would call the extreme environments of the military. So the people that are up in the air or the people that are beneath the sea. So you've got the submariners and the divers and obviously the pilots and so on, because they're the two extremes. And often that's when the medical prognosis kicks in. You have to have a certain medical capacity and ability to perform those in those environments for health and safety reasons. So the pilot said the one thing that he was, felt really low in mood about was his loss of freedom, because being a pilot to him meant freedom because you're up in the sky. So it was all about translating how you can get that sense of freedom again in what he was going to do. So we did I did lots of different, what I call left brain skills analysis and transferable skills analysis work with him, values, work values, what interests, going back to childhood. We also then incorporated what his next best career would look like and feel like to him, because it's the feeling that gives you that vision and that motivation to then embrace it. So a lot of that we did outside, and although I couldn't take him up in the sky because we couldn't fly any longer, I used to take him to higher up places. So quite often I'd take him up a hill, to kind of get that perspective, for instance, or up a slope, or just get him up higher in a higher space, or I'd get him climbing steps, feeling like he was raising up. So
Mm.
I'd use that environment to work with him. And I would get him to look up in the sky. I'd get him to imagine he was drifting on one of his fluffy white clouds and how that would feel. So I would incorporate the nature there. So a number of different ways I worked with him. And eventually what happened with him, he got a placement within the National Trust locally, because he really wanted to go down the outdoors based route. He didn't want to work indoors really at all. And he then decided to retrain in landscape and horticulture and landscape management. And he ended up working, I think, about a year later within an executive golf course environment. So that was what he transitioned into. So, and he was also, that was one of his interests. He was a golfer. So that's also why he decided to go down that route as well. So that was him, for example.
And is he happy in this new role?
As far as I know, yes. As far as I
Um,
know, yeah.
that's brilliant. Could you actually explain for people, for listeners who don't know about vocational rehabilitation, what that is?
Okay.
Because you're very experienced in vocational rehabilitation, which is one of the many strands of occupational therapy of what we can go into. As you
Absolutely.
mentioned, we can go into loads of different fields. So yeah, could you mention like you talked about transferable skills analysis as well? Could you sort of define that as well? You know what that
Sure.
means? Yeah.
Okay. So vocational rehabilitation is basically it's anything to do with work, and vocation doesn't necessarily have to be paid work. So it can be initially an interest or voluntary work or a leisure activity that somebody may start to do to get some structure and routine back into their life. So there's a model called Ikigai, which is another Japanese word, which means your purpose, the reason you get out of bed in the morning. It's your sense of purpose, and it's one of the reasons that gives us a longer, happier, healthier life. So a sense of purpose is key to our well-being as well as bringing us income. So people think of work as just bringing income, but actually studies have shown it's not just about income. It's about, a sense of achievement, sense of purpose. So vocational rehabilitation happens when that gets interrupted for whatever reason. It could be through injury, it could be through illness, it could be an accident like mine, it could be that people have been born with a disability and therefore, what can they potentially do? What can they train in? What adjustments are needed at work? So I mentioned physical pieces of equipment. So for example, I've got chronic back pain and neck pain, so I use a particular chair that's adjustable for me. Is one example. I might take a few extra regular breaks to help me stand up and stretch. It can be other things as well. So it could be, as I say, somebody helping you to do the work that you need to do, or some particular software. So I work with visual impairment clients for who might need some particular software equipment to help with that. In terms of transferable skills analysis, that's just one aspect of what a vocational case manager or vocational rehabilitation practitioner or expert would look at. So it's looking at all those skills or interests that someone may have, and then they cannot, for whatever reason, continue in that job role. So the VR model is basically, can someone go back to their original job with the same employer if they're employed, or they might be self-employed? So can they go back to that original job? If not, the next phase down would be, can they go back to that particular employer or field of work, or with a different employer? So if it's not with their original employer, it could be with somebody else, but it's still within the same sort of field, but they might need to have some adjustments or an adapted job role. So, for example, I had a recent client who was a driver, but also worked in retail. Prior to injury, he was out driving 2/3 of the time and retail a third. Post injury, due to his injuries, he was now driving 10% and getting a lift through access to work. But he was mostly more in retail. But because he had the driving knowledge, he was helping to schedule where the other drivers went. So he was still using his driving and regional patch knowledge to help with the logistics and the planning of the routes and so on, but he was working more customer face to face in retail, for example.
Mhm.
So it's looking at those transferable skills, or it could be a lot of people decide they've had something major happen, they've been made redundant for whatever reason, or they can't work through injury. They might actually say, do you know what? I've gone into this because it was my parents' dream. It was what they wanted me to do after school. I went into it because I felt pressured to do it. Now I can't do that. I actually want to do what I want to do. So let's look at that. So, for example, I had a young man, he had a stroke when he was 29. He told me he'd worked in the stockbroking market, stock market. That's probably why he had the stroke, because he was working 60 hours a week, taking lots of caffeine, probably some stuff he shouldn't be taking, and not leading a very healthy lifestyle. So he felt that this was his lesson, this was his turnaround moment, that the universe was saying, come on, this is your time to change. So I did a lot of nature-based work with him. And he actually then decided to go back to his original role, but part-time. And when I say part-time, it was probably full-time for the rest of us, but for him it was part-time. And we did that over a phased return. So it was a gradual process over 8 weeks. He went back and we were monitoring how he was getting on and whether everybody was happy. And then he decided to make a plan. He told his father, that was a leading influence in his life and career, I don't want to do this anymore. It's killing me. So he then decided to transition and with his best friend, within a year, set up a restaurant, which is what he'd always wanted to do. So his best friend was a chef and he decided to set up a restaurant. So he transitioned out of the stock market and into the restaurant business and much happier.
Wow. And yeah, that's a brilliant example because I guess some people might think that getting to certain status or level of financial means of and job role will bring them that happiness and that success that
Mm,
they're looking for. But actually, they realize that they're not happy, they're burnt out, they're unwell, they're not
mhm.
satisfied, they haven't found their purpose. Um, so I hope that yeah, that individual that you talked about has found their purpose now in this new role.
Absolutely.
So, in terms of speaking about the workplace, how do you see
Mhm.
this kind of intervention, nature-based approach being relevant in the workplace, including productivity, sustainable performance, and well-being? So, what would you say to managers who and to employees
Sure.
around this topic, around yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so as we mentioned right at the start, techno stress is huge.
Mm,
Sickness absence is rising.
mm,
It's not going to go down. It's a global issue. There's a big statistic about presenteeism. People are present, so they may not take their absence, but they're not really productive. So it's a globally recognised issue and symptom. So without a digital detox, and without some form of stress reduction. And when I say stress, I don't just mean emotional stress, I mean physical stress, stressors, cardiovascular, autoimmune, fatigue, burnout, all of that.
yeah.
That all to me sums up some sort of stress. Then, where's the world going to be? Where's the economy going to be? So, quite often, people bring me in for usually 2 to 6 hours, depending on what they need. And I help to bring them nature, even if it's indoors. So I wanted to give an example. So there was a residential care home, and they had quite a lot going on for the residents, but they wanted something more specific for their team. The team were of all ages, so I think the youngest was about 21, and the oldest was in their 60s. And they wanted me to do a bit about what I call conventional some energy management stuff, some stress management stuff, some a little bit about manual handling, but they had somebody else to do that. This was more about how could we use what they had around them throughout their workday in a practical way. So I spent 2 hours with them. We did a little bit of theory, but it was a lovely residential care home. They had some lovely gardens. So we spent most of it outside or looking outside. And I gave them some top tips, like some of those I've previously shown you, ways they could de-stress in an instant using their tea break, their lunch break, after work, what they did when they logged into work, how they could set their day up mentally and emotionally and energetically, how they could work together and support each other as well, to remind each other of the tools that they've been taught. And you mentioned outcome measures right at the start. So this particular team, I did the profile and mood score, Dr. Lee's score with them. I asked them to pick one thing they wanted to change from being tired, being stressed, feeling irritable, I think were the three. 100% of them felt different in 2 hours or within 48 hours. Not only that, I was delighted to get feedback because I followed up with them 2 weeks later. So I did the session, 2 hour session. I gave them a little playbook. I don't like to call them workbooks. I gave them a little playbook. I said, practice some of this stuff with each other, supporting each other, and with friends and family. And let's have a catch up call in 2 weeks' time. So I had a catch up call, and we also collated some email responses as well. And I was delighted to see that the ripple effect. So one lady had literally, bless her, her elderly mother had been in A&E the morning that I was due to give the workshop. She'd been up since 5. She'd sorted out her elderly mother, got her home, and still came to the workshop because she wanted so much to come. So she said, obviously, she was quite fatigued and quite stressed out. So she said it worked a treat. Then there was a young mother that had just literally just returned after maternity leave and was struggling because the baby was crying at night. You know, she wasn't getting much sleep. Her spouse was stressed, this, that, and the other. So she tried it on herself, particularly before she was breastfeeding and also when the baby was going to sleep. She said she slept better and the baby slept better. So that was great. And then another lady was a grandma, and her 6-year-old grandson had autism. So one of the other techniques I use with the breath work is we get a bottle of bubbles, you know, play bubbles, and we go outside and I use it as a mindful breathing exercise, and also it helps connect us to our inner child. And if you've got pets, like I used to have cats, they used to like the bubbles, they chase the bubbles, makes us laugh. So laughter's good because again it releases some of those natural brain chemicals. So she used some of the techniques for herself, but also with her grandson. And she said they had noticed a difference with his schooling. So there was a ripple effect. They felt more relaxed at work. They felt more productive, more present at work, and they were passing on the tools. They're evergreen tools you can use anytime, anywhere. That's what I love about it.
Love that. And I love that you make it so accessible that, if people have, have difficulty going out for whatever reason,
Mm.
whatever barriers there are to them, that actually we can make it accessible,
Yep.
have it indoors,
Yes.
and to us, being brought to us. What, if you've got a disability, impairment, injury,
Mhm.
you're a parent that requires you to be indoors a lot of the time.
Mm.
Like you spoke about making it very accessible, actually. There's no excuse
No,
not to have
absolutely not.
nature.
There's
Yeah,
absolutely not. No.
yeah,
And I will show people how they can bring nature into their particular setting. You know,
yeah.
how they can bring it, how they can include it. There's absolutely no reason. I mean, prop alert again. So this is another one
Yeah,
of the props that I
please.
love because this
Nice.
actually is from an aquarium, but it's just a tree trunk. So I talk about it in different ways. It's about taking one step at a time to feel top of your tree, or it's about we do one thing at a time to feel top of your tree. So, or we can break down the bigger chunk, into smaller bite-sized pieces, so we can do it that way.
And can
So,
you
and
describe
also
what?
it's very tactile.
Yeah, can you describe what's on the tree trunk?
So yes, so it's this is a resin tree trunk, and it's got little steps going winding around the tree trunk, and they've got like little steps of fungi, or yes, I think it is fungi living on the tree trunk, so that it's curving around the tree trunk right to the top of the tree trunk. So that's the prop that I'm using here.
And is that a real tree
It's
trunk?
a resin one. This is something you might find in an aquarium.
Okay, lovely. And by the way, I absolutely love your nature background and the color blue
So
you're
that is one of
wearing
my
and the
that's one of
flowers
my
on your top.
so the nature background's one of my nature snacks, as I like to call them. This was taken at Hampton Court
Yeah.
by the river. And I used to live near there. So this is, and also it's a flowing river. It's lots of blues in there. And it just reminded me actually that one of the other methods that I use if we are by a river or I get people to imagine a river, I use another occupational therapy model called the Kara River model. So KAWA, where people see their life or business or career flowing like a river, and the rocks might be the obstacles. And like water, what does water do when it meets an obstacle? It flows over or around it.
Yeah.
So we look at how clients can clear those obstacles from their free flowing river, for example.
Yeah, the OT Hub had actually posted about this, and I posted it on LinkedIn recently. It's one of my
Okay,
favorite occupational therapy models.
there we go.
In terms of like places, you mentioned Hampton Court.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'd love to know what places you've been in terms of, in terms of your favorite nature spots that you've been
Oh, wow.
around. It's a big question, probably,
It's a big question.
a lot in terms in the UK and abroad. What have been some of your favorite places around kind of like nature, botanical gardens, whatever you want
Wow.
to
Okay.
share.
So, well, so I spent 25 years in Surrey, and it's full of gardens and nature-based places. So you've got the Royal Horticultural Society at Wisley, which is beautiful. You've got Kew Gardens. I used to be a member of all of those. Hampton Court Palace, I used to be a member of that. National Trust, there's loads of places all around. This month, Gardener's World magazine has got a 2 for 1 card. So you can get in for two for the price of one in lots of places all over the UK. Highly recommend getting that. Um, Certainly any of the wildlife and wetland places. So, for example, when I was down near West Bay, you've got Seaton wetlands, and they're all over the place too. I've worked a lot with wildlife trusts. I've done a lot of work with the Dorset Wildlife Trust. Obviously, I'm now in the New Forest, so I've got the forest and the sea. So only the other week I was at Exbury Gardens in Hampshire. You've also got another lovely place called Fursey Gardens near oh, it's gone out, the name's gone out of my head. It's the capital of the New Forest and it's just gone completely out of my head. But anyway, it's at Minstead. Fursey Gardens is at Minstead. Um, and yeah, so lots and lots of beautiful spots to go. I mean, I do lots of work in and around the New Forest. Um, I won't divulge those because I don't want the world and his wife to know where I go. But yeah, there's lots of lovely places to go. And the New Forest, Forestry England have got a list of all their different forest spots. And obviously the sea as well. So I'm right near Milford on Sea. You've got Lymington. There's Leap Country Park, which isn't too far. And then you've got the other way. You've got places like the Purbecks. I used to live near there, go there quite a lot. So there's so many different places to go. Beautiful places.
There's, why do we need to go abroad when we've got so many nice places in,
Exactly. And quite often,
vacation
people
in the
say,
UK?
oh, I don't know what's on my doorstep. And I said, well, just start having a look. And quite often they're
Cool.
free. So
Yeah.
there's a little nature reserve literally within 10 minutes up the road and it's perfectly free to get in.
Wow. So nice. It's right on our doorstep
Mm.
a lot of the time, isn't it?
Mm.
And well, what about abroad? Have you got some, kind of favorite spots
So
abroad?
that's my next wish. I haven't done as much abroad. That's on my wish list. That's what I'm going to be working on. So
Bucket
I
list.
want to work more in the UK and also abroad.
Yeah.
So yeah, so Tuscany's on my bucket list. Arizona maybe. Who knows? Lots of different places. Spain.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm open to I'm open to offers.
Love it. And you mentioned about your divorce. Thank you for being open about that. In terms of kind of, when people go through like a transition in their life, such a big life event like a divorce, kind of how can nature therapy help people through such big life
Mhm.
transitions? And, feel free to talk about it from your own lived experience if you want as
Sure,
well. Yeah.
sure. So well, it depends, I suppose, if the divorce was planned or not, kind of who instigated it. So in my instance, it wasn't me that instigated it. So it was a big shock. And also mine came right after a very strong bereavement from the loss of my father. So I
Mm,
was dealing with the loss of my father and then the loss of a business and the so I was recovering from a health incident, loss of my father, loss of a business, and then loss of my home.
wow. Sorry to hear.
And loss of a marriage. So there's a lot of loss going on.
Yeah, a lot of
So
grieving.
a lot of grieving and a lot of loss, a lot of adjustment. So thankfully at the time I managed to get to live somewhere and I was right by the river. So I was right by the Thames. So for me, I would be out by the river every day.
Yeah.
And there's beautiful gardens all around there as well. So I'd be sitting in the gardens or I'd be walking along the river. And it's interesting then that we were just talking about the River of Life. So it's basically, so what I would say is about aligning people with their flow and when things happen, how to get back into that flow state.
Mm,
So one of the things I'm currently been working on more and more since Christmas actually is connecting people with the 4 elements. So, and the properties of those 4 elements. So I'm bringing in my artistic and spiritual self and the elements of fire, earth, air, and water, the 4 directions. So you've got the north, south, east, and west. I'm actually redesigning the compass at the moment, and I'm painting that, so that will be ready. within the next couple of months. So when we're out, for example, or if people are outside, I get them to walk a path and I get them to walk in different paths. And I get them to literally try on their best future path. And I was guest speaking about this at the weekend at the Future Vision Summit. So when people get to feel what different directions are like for them, combined with their left logic brain, combined with the power of nature when you're outside, because remember, it boosts your problem solving ability when you're outside. So, using all of those combination of techniques, that's when people really get their aha moment. So, I'll give you a recent response. Had a businesswoman who had been procrastinating for several months over what title to give her business offering, what service to give her business offering, what actions to take. So therefore, she wasn't taking any action. She needed to do something, but she wasn't sure what. So I had a testimonial. I took her outside. We were outside for about an hour and a half, and then she had a bit of follow-up work to do. So all in all, it was about 2 hours. And I had a lovely testimonial from her to say, I don't know what you did, but within 2 weeks of our session, I've done more in 2 weeks than I've done in 7 months for my business and myself, and I've gained more clients. So that's pretty powerful.
Mm,
And as I said right at the beginning, if I can help people with acquired brain injury, where the prediction to get back to work is between 20 and 40%,
mm.
and I was getting people back into the military at a rate of 55 to 72%, then using all of those tools, that's pretty powerful. So imagine what I can do for people that may not have that severity of injury or whatever.
Yeah, I love
So,
that. And I love that you really, occupational therapists and, we really work in a really person-centered, holistic way to empower people to um, get back to independence and to
absolutely.
what matters to them and what's meaningful to them and their purpose and their motivation for life. And yeah, everything that's meaningful to them, as much as possible. And you talked about spirituality. As occupational therapists, we are one of the few, if not possibly the only regulated healthcare profession that are trained in spirituality when talking about that person-centered approach. In our occupational therapy models, um, there is a Canadian occupational therapy model that comes to mind that has spirituality within it.
Mhm.
Um, so it would be great to know what that kind of, you talked about Reiki before, you talked about other spirituality aspects, and it'd be great to know what that means to you and also how you've used your therapeutic use of self and how you've used spirituality for people when it matters to them in terms of what's
Mhm.
meaningful for them.
Okay, so I don't necessarily go down a religion-based approach. I was brought up in a very strict religion-based approach, which didn't fully resonate with me, but when you're born into something, sometimes it doesn't. So I made a choice to investigate all religions. And I'm a bit like, I love cooking as well. So I kind of have a basic recipe and then I try out different flavors and see how it tastes.
Yeah.
So I guess for me, with the mindfulness, with the slowing down, with the forest bathing, that's a lot of Zen, it's a lot of Buddhism and like philosophy in there. But I'm not any of those. I wouldn't call myself a Buddhist. I wouldn't call myself anything in particular. I just feel and sense in my own inner knowing that I just kind of connect with a divine inner wisdom or source. That's how I personally view it.
Mm,
I don't impose my viewpoints on any clients. It's however they see it. So when I'm talking to clients, it's that compass. So prop alert, I'm holding up a resin compass here until I've drawn my own. So that's a conventional compass with the four compass points, north, south, east, and west, and then you've got the central point. So in terms of spirituality, we are at the center. So it's about aligning yourself with what's your best direction. So for today, for instance, Today is a Monday, and that would focus very much more on the westerly direction, which focuses on our intuition, our inner wisdom. It also focuses on cycles of time. So that can be anything from the cycle of a day to the cycle of a month, to the cycle of a season. And it's also how we feel about things. So it links very much to water, hence my watery background today. Hence, I'm wearing blue. One, because it's calm, but also I know blue is the colour of communication and it helps with my throat centre. My energy centre is blue. But I also focus on particularly since Christmas, I've been working on. I've always been fascinated with, as I said, as above, so below. So very much grounding. I like the science, and my foundation is occupational therapy and all my learnt techniques. But I'm also very connected to above, whatever above means for you. So whether you call it God or Allah or whatever you might call that above, I call it the divine source. I'm very connected with that.
Mm.
So, what I also am fascinated with is the cosmos. And I know a lot of people are. So, again, Monday is Moon Day. So, again, prop alert, I'm holding up my moonstone, which is a crescent moon. So, for example, today's question you might want to ask yourself is what's ready to grow? If it's a new moon, it's about what new beginnings, what are you ready to plant, what's ready to grow? If it's a fuller moon, what am I ready to complete and let go of, for example? Also, it connects to Neptune today, so it's a Monday, so it's not just moon. It's the water, and again, I welcome insights from within because everything starts from within. So everybody thinks, oh, this has happened to me. I've had this accident. It's not my fault. It's somebody else's fault. It may well be somebody else's fault, but it's how you react to it. You can have two people in theory with the same diagnosis. And I learnt this very early on in my OT training. And I taught it to all my students and I explain this to all my clients. You can have two people with the same diagnosis, right? I can tell you my diagnosis. I've got a ruptured, L4 to this, that, and the other, S1, paralysis in my right leg, right? You can have someone with that same diagnosis. And I have been personally out to see clients with my exact same diagnosis who are hardly getting off their bed every day.
Mm.
So it's not about the diagnosis, it's what person that diagnosis has. It's how we react from within to that diagnosis, that incident, that
Yeah.
happening. So we can have two people that are the same age as me when they got divorced. They can have, had various situations. There's lots of people out there who are having separations, divorce. We can all react differently.
Mm.
You know?
And how do you feel that that's helped you, your faith through your life events like your divorce, your injury, any other kind of challenges in your life that you've had?
I think with everything that I've been through, it's about centering yourself and knowing, and that's where the future vision comes in, because often when you step into your best future and try it on for size,
Mm,
there's something better out there. You bring in that hope. It's not even about hope. So there's a book called Chicken Soup for the Soul by Jack Canfield. And
mm,
he went to this party on a boat,
mhm,
and it was a come as you will be party. He went there as a world's best-selling author with a mock-up version of a book with the book title he had in mind. He dressed in smart, expensive clothes. He introduced himself as I am Jack Canfield. I'm a world-selling author. He hadn't even written the book yet.
mm,
And guess what happened? He became a world-class selling author. And
mm.
it was a series of books that he wrote. So it's if you have this vision, but it's not just about the vision. We can all have a vision. It's what you do about it. So if you have an inner core, like a tree trunk, like my lovely tree trunk, if your core is there and you're rooted
Mm.
in who you are, then you can branch out. And even I think there's that lovely there's the sycamore tree that was cut down. Everyone was up in arms about it because it was one of our national treasures. It was that one tree, and then it sadly got cut down.
Mm.
They've now grown saplings from that sycamore tree, and they are going around the country planting the saplings from that original tree, and it's symbolizing new growth. There's always something better that you can be focusing on. It's what you focus your energy on. If
Yeah.
you focus on the dead roots and the dead bits that have fallen down, Well, that's where you're going to be. If you focus on, no, I'm going to rise out of this and I'm going to do stuff. There's loads of inspirational stories that have people that have done that.
Yeah, and what does energy mean to you from, yeah, from your own lived experience and from just, talking about it for anybody who would think, again, energy is woohoo, it's not real,
Okay.
what would you say to them in terms of kind of like what you've seen about what it means for you and what it has meant and means to the clients you've worked with?
Okay, so I'll start with myself. So when I had my injury, I said to you I use lots of different tools. One of the tools that I used, I printed out a black and white copy of the spine and the vertebral discs. So it's black and white. I printed out several of those. So I visualized every day with mindful breathing that my spine was healing, that
Wow.
my disc was healing. I was taking supplements, I was doing exercise, I was doing all the conventional things as well. Dr. David Hamilton is a doctor. He started out in pharmaceuticals. He's written several books. One of his latest books is called It's Not Woo Woo. He talks about Reiki, he talks about energy, he talks about crystals, he talks about various other modalities that many of us in the complementary health practitioner world have been using and have known, but science is now backing it all up.
Mm,
Okay. So it's about complementing. It's not alternative, it's complementing traditional medicine. And if you go back to pharmaceuticals, a lot of the pharmaceutical drugs we have today were originally medicinal plants grown in monastery gardens.
yeah.
They derive from herbs.
Mm,
So, it's not so energy and energy centers and keeping your energy centers clear and balanced. It's about that word balance again. That will help. I was energetically working on my spinal nerves. I
mm,
was sending, and Dr. David Hamilton talks about your mind can heal your body in his book, Your Mind Can Heal Your Body. He's got
mm,
loads of case studies there where people visualize healing.
mhm.
So it's not to say um, not to use the medical model. I've got nothing against surgeons that do surgery and doctors that prescribe drugs, and I've taken them myself, and I've had but I personally avoided spinal surgery. I avoided spinal fusion. I wanted to try everything else first. I'm not 100% perfect, but I managed to avoid the surgery.
And through that visualization, and the power of the mind, how did that manifest for you then in terms of, you know,
So I've still got some nerve damage in my foot. As I said, I still can't feel underneath my foot. I still haven't got full movement in my ankle, and I
Mhm,
still get back and neck pain.
mhm,
However, I would say that I am more resilient than most because I use all my ergonomic adjustments. I take my postural breaks, and I need to take one soon because my back's telling me to take one soon. Um, but yeah, I use all of that, but also every day I set my day up energetically before I start work. So I do a short mindful moment in nature, outside, looking outside, standing out on the, back doorstep, doing my mindful breath work. And at the end of the day, I will get rid of my day. I will get rid of clients' energies and top myself up like my mobile phone.
mm,
If we think of ourselves like a mobile phone, if we don't top up, we run out.
yeah,
We either run out mentally or we run out physically.
yeah, and we need to
Something's got to
recharge.
give.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And you know, the power of the mind is really incredible, isn't it?
Mhm.
I remember watching a documentary called The Mountain Within Me,
Uh-huh.
with Ed Jackson,
Hmm.
former rugby player. I don't know if he still plays rugby or not, but he showed, as well as, um, I attended an event where there was a triathlon athlete, and Claire, she was absolutely incredible in terms of how, powerful, um, you know, her mind was in terms of
Hmm.
rehabilitating herself. And same with Ed as well,
Yeah.
And it just shows what, when you put your mind to it, what you can achieve
Hmm.
in the rehabilitation sense,
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
I've seen that with clients. I had a
Yeah.
client come to me. He was 30 when he had his stroke
Hmm.
and lost the left side.
Yeah.
And they told him he'd never walk again. And he came into me, he was wearing a foot drop splint, but he was walking.
Yeah.
And he later got given the key to the City of London. He was an architect. He had his own architect business. And he said to me at the time, he was 50 at the time, and he said, I never had any rehab. There was no rehab at the time.
Yeah.
Can you help me? Can you do some rehab with me? And can you see if we can get any further results? I said, absolutely. I
Mm,
said, just get a GP referral. We'll give it a go. I said, textbooks say 2 years. I said, let's throw the textbook out.
yeah. No, that's so true. And you talked about your routine. Can you tell us a bit more about, a day and a week in the life of Maria, in terms of what that looks like, any sort of tips around, you mentioned a lot of tips already, but kind of, sort of what helps you to really ground yourself, yeah, slow down in a busy world, and really support, what helps you to support your own optimal functioning on a day to day.
Okay, so my week varies according to what my schedule is. So at the moment, I have set vocational expert work and vocational case management work days. So that's usually the equivalent of 3 days a week. And then I also have my nature-based work days, which can vary. Um, so I also make sure that I have a digital detox on a Sunday. So I have at least one day off where I don't really text or scroll or do any of that stuff. I try to make Sunday, if I can, that day. Or if it can't be a Sunday, because sometimes I am doing some nature-based think like writing and my artwork generally is my creative day or my nature day. But I try to have those pockets of bliss throughout my day, whatever work I'm doing, because I think it's so important. So I compartmentalize my energy and my time with how I know I work best. So I think best in the morning. So if I've got lots of cognitive, high intensive reports to write or things to do, that'll be my morning. As the day goes on, I tend to do more meetings or phone calls or things like this, podcasts or guest speaking, whatever. If I've got clients, nature-based clients, and they want workshops, I tend to try and do them in the morning or have them sort of mid-morning to mid-afternoon because that's generally when most people will function better,
Mm,
although it can vary. So sometimes people might want an evening session, for example. And I do work with shift workers. So then I really have to get my productivity tips out to keep myself alert because I'm not a night owl. Traditionally, I'm not a night owl, but I will do it. So I kind of use all my tools to kind of help myself there. And
yeah.
yeah, so it's things like breath, it's everything I've told you. It's using all my senses. So
Mm,
another quick one is what I call a nature date. So you can stand or sit in nature and you can just turn yourself around 365 degrees. What instantly catches your attention, what flirts with you, kind of, it could be something visual, it could be a sound. It's kind of a quick thing to do. And what that does is it heightens your awareness. It sets you up for that's a good one to do first thing before work
mm,
or halfway through the day when you're kind of dipping a bit. Go
yeah.
on a nature date, kind of and that helps like, oh, whoosh, okay, we've got to be a bit more alert now, you know?
Love that. Yeah. Do you know what? Everything that you've mentioned is amazing in terms of that preventative work that people can do
Absolutely.
before they hit crisis
Yeah.
stage of being unwell, burnt out,
Yeah.
and chronic illnesses
Yeah.
occurring. There's just so much preventative work and just golden nuggets that you've shared with us today. So,
Thing I'm working on now is my art, my writing, my workshops, guest speaking. I love speaking, as you can
yeah.
imagine. I speak on all sorts of topics, and my compass and planetary alignment work.
Do you have any other prompts that you wanted to share at all? Or if
Okay, so
you have any
well,
others, feel free to.
yes, I will. So somebody actually, you mentioned interestingly, the divorce side. So one of my friends gave me this beautiful selenite heart. It's a crystal selenite heart,
Oh,
but
beautiful.
on the tip of the heart, one side it's got a chip, so it's broken, and it's very, very heavy. So it fits in the palm of my hand. You can see there. So it's a really good mindful tool. People can use pebbles or coins, whatever they like. But if I need a bit of, if I'm feeling like I need a bit of self-love right now, kind of, if I feel that, oh, I could do with like, giving myself a hug, a bit of self-love. What this heart reminds me of is even if you've had a broken heart, whether it be through a broken relationship or something feels broken within you, you can still be whole. So although that tip is broken, and I love the Japanese, there's a term that's escaping me at the moment, but it's where they've got chipped china. Like there's a chipped china vase, and you can put the pieces of the vase back together, and they use this special golden or silver paint. So the vase is made whole again. But
Wow.
even though you can still see the chips and the breaks in it, they actually use the paint to show the beauty of those chips in that vase, but it's still a whole thing.
I
So
love
that
that.
to me signifies that we can still have those chips. I still can't move my ankle completely. I've still got back and neck pain. I've still got my health, some of my health issues, but I'm still a whole person.
Absolutely. We all have our yeah, challenges and imperfections and ailments. But yeah, we come as a whole still, don't we?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And also, it gives me hope that even though I am divorced and I am feeling ready for the right relationship right now, so yeah, it kind of gives you that sense of centering. I don't need a relationship to feel whole. It will be lovely if I could connect with that right person to be in that relationship if it's meant to be.
Well, self-love is really important, and you seem like you've got a lot of that and a lot to give as well. A lot of love to give and positive energy. And I wanted to show you actually something which you'll be very pleased about. So
Okay.
I'm just reaching out for it. One moment. So my partner and I actually attended a wellness retreat. As spring opened up. It was following the Health and Wellbeing conference with
Uh-huh.
a lovely couple of ladies who also featured on Function First Care podcasts. So
Uh-huh.
and Laura and Blaze, and we actually, my partner and I, we call each other big cringe, but we call each other Nala
Oh.
and um and Simba. So
Oh, wow.
we
And you've got
actually
some
we
seeds.
actually planted peace lily seeds, our intentions, and planted some seeds in
Brilliant.
there. They haven't obviously come out yet. The but
Yeah, lovely. Love
yeah,
it.
let's
Love
see
it.
what comes out. But I just wanted to share that with you, and
That's lovely.
it's right by my windowsill. So you know,
Brilliant.
when it does
Love
come out,
it.
I will be, looking out for it. And
Ah,
hopefully I can share
brilliant.
a picture of when, it blossoms. But, it's
Brilliant.
another visualization tool around how you can
Yes.
see your intention blossom.
Yes,
Remember that. So,
absolutely. And that's one of the things, funny enough, I'm going to be doing. So I'm going to be running workshops about planting your seeds of intention.
yeah.
So rather than having a 2D vision board, I have a multidimensional terrarium. And I have planted my vision in my terrarium and it's growing.
Wow.
So that's one way to do it. So I'll be doing that. I will also be sharing skills and knowledge with clinicians and professionals that want to know more about how they can use nature and future vision and some of the other tools I use in their own practices. So if people are interested in that, I will be looking to put that on.
Love that. Can you elaborate more about that? What
So
would you be?
it only came to me this morning, so it's still a tiny seed. So
Yeah.
I will be putting on my own workshop for professionals and
Oh,
clinicians. So
lovely. We'll look out for that.
interested in nature, in future vision, in maybe working on themselves first, because unless you work on yourself, you can't work on other people. And then there'll be a follow-up as to how they can use it with their client practice.
Amazing. Yeah, we need more of you, Maria, out there. In this industry, absolutely. And is there any other prompts you want to share? Feel free to if you want, because I don't want to cut you
Uh,
short. And
okay.
is there also any other case studies? Because I know you said at the start that you were going to mention. Feel free again if there's anything else
Yes.
that you wanted to kind of mention.
Yes, I will. So you've prompted me with the seeds that you've planted. So
Yeah.
I was working within an acute mental health facility for older people, and I had just done my was it shortly after? No, probably no. I'd probably done a few years of my nature therapy practice. And I was asked to see a 90-year-old lady who basically was starving herself. She had lost motivation to continue living. So, from an occupational therapy point of view, we were trying to keep her hydrated and motivated and everything else. So, I went in and I sat by her. She was lying in bed and she hadn't touched her water jug at all. And I was just talking to her about what she found valuable and what her interests had been, growing up and in her life. She was interested in tennis and she travelled a lot and she loved her garden. She could no longer tend her garden, so she had somebody at home to help her with the garden. Sadly, she had lost her daughter a few years before, and she had lost a lot of her friends and family. So she said, I don't really see the point in being here. So we talked a lot about, and it was spring, which is interesting because obviously we're now in spring. And her bed, she could see outside, and outside the daffodils were up. So it was around this time of year, daffodils and tulips. So after speaking to her, she didn't want to get out of bed, and she wouldn't drink any water. So I went away and had a think. And the next day I came back to her and she told me her favourite colour was pink. So I'd gone out and I'd bought a mini rose, a mini pink rose that was not yet in bloom. It had a little bud on it. So I went in and I said, after our chat yesterday, and she doesn't mind me using her name. She's given me consent to use her name. And there's a reason, I'll tell you why I'm using her name. Her name was Pearl. So I went in to see Pearl and I said, Pearl, after our chat yesterday, I've got this rose somebody's given me, but I'm really very busy. So I wondered whether you could possibly help me out. I'm going to leave this rose by your water jug. And what I would absolutely love is, it would be very rude of me to let this rose die because my friend wouldn't be very happy if I let it die because it was a gift. So would you mind sitting up in bed occasionally, swinging your legs round and giving my rose a water and minding my rose for me? No, she said, I'd love to do that. I said, okay. I said, well, while you're doing that, as you've got your legs round, you're swinging your legs round by the bed, it's right by your water jug. So without you watering this rose, then I've got no one else to water my rose. So do you think you could just take a sip of the water yourself once you've given my rose some water as well? Yes, yes, she said, I'll do that. So she started drinking the water. She then started watering the rose, and then the rose started flowering. So then what I did, a couple of days later, I went in and I moved the rose. I moved the rose. I said, Brett, you can't really see it. You've got to twist your head round to see it. So how about I put it over by your armchair? And when you walk over to the armchair to water the rose, you can have a little sit and then you can get a different view of your room. And it was by the window. Her armchair was by the window. So gradually, myself and the physiotherapist got Rose up walking over to the room to water the rose that she was minding. And then I got her looking out the window. And then I said, well, there's more plants that need watering outside your room. I said, we haven't got time to do it. So we gradually got her out. We gradually got her outside of her room. We gradually got her eating and drinking. And then she said, one of the reasons is I haven't got anything I can do. I can't tend my garden and I can't exercise anymore. I love tennis. I said, I'm not sure we can get you playing tennis again, but have you ever tried Tai Chi? No, not heard of that. So long story short, we got Pearl doing seated Tai Chi to help with her balance and to help with her motivation. We got her a bigger plant pot and she planted up some more plants that she had in her outside her room. And then we joined her up with a seated Tai Chi group that we got transport for her when she went home with a support worker that she then carried on and she made some new friends. The other thing we did before she left, I bought her in a shell because I was right by the sea and her name was Pearl. So I told her about my oldest friend. My oldest friend was Hilda. Hilda was 99 when she passed. And I said, Hilda's written down some pearls of wisdom to pass on to friends and family. And I said to Pearl, how about you decorate this pearl shell with a little decorative pearl that we stuck in the middle and we put wisdom in it. She wrote wisdom in it. She took that home. She started writing a few words of wisdom to pass on to her friends and family for when she was no longer there. And
Wow.
she wanted me to share her story. Hence, Pearl's words of wisdom.
That's so beautiful. And I love how you use what was meaningful to her through the therapy and also introduced something new to her that, I'm sure sounds like it was very meaningful to her as well. And that you were able to bring meaning and purpose to her
Mhm.
when it sounds like she felt like she didn't have any or much meaning at all. And that's why I love occupational therapy because we really, like again, you've shown that you can, uh, you're working really in a person-centered way that, to really tap into what matters to an individual in a really person-centered, holistic way, and looking at what's meaningful to them um, and bringing that access of nature to
Mhm.
to the person if they can't access it outdoors. So that's really beautiful, Maria. Thank you so much. And
That's
yeah,
okay.
have you got would you like to share anything
I've
else?
got one more prop to share with you.
Yes,
So
please
I recently went to a workshop, and there was a psychologist there, and she had a floor mat, and I've walked labyrinths before, and I've done a finger labyrinth as well, and I know how powerful they are, but I didn't know the full extent of them. So she spoke about she'd taken this floor-based symbol, which is an ancient symbol, 4,000 years old, on a floor mat. She'd taken it into prisons, she'd taken it into hospitals, and she'd taken it into schools. They're now doing research into what happens when you walk or trace your finger on a labyrinth symbol. And you might know that in our brain, we've got labyrinths within our brain. And I also, unfortunately, was unlucky enough to have something called labyrinthitis. When I had labyrinthitis, it means you can't get your equilibrium. You can't stand up, sit down without physically being sick. It was really that bad. And if you've never had it, I don't wish it on anyone, but I had it. And I was meditating, lying there, not being very well at all. And it came to me in a meditation, get to a labyrinth. And I thought, where the hell am I going to find a labyrinth around here? Anyway, at the time I was at West Bay in Dorset, and lo and behold, the case company I work for are based in Seaton, and Seaton has got its own cliffside labyrinth. Who knew? So the next time I managed to get myself into the office, I walked up onto the labyrinth at Seaton, which is an amazing labyrinth to walk. Apparently, there's one near Weymouth. I haven't been there. And apparently, there's a new one being built in Cornwall, which I'm intending to go to. And there's another one in North Devon. So they're all over the country.
Wow.
So just for people that can see, this is the labyrinth. There's two different there's the various different types of labyrinths. This is a Greek labyrinth. This is a Cretan labyrinth, and there's only one way in and one way out of a labyrinth. So it's a circular symbol where it's not like a maze where you get lost in dead ends. There's only one way in and one way out, and you either walk it, physically walk it, or you can trace it with your finger. If you can't get, mine's a brass one, but you can get wooden ones and you can print them out. You can get print-based ones, and I've used the print-based ones in workshops. And what it literally does, it aligns both sides of your brain, the both sides of the hemispheres in your brain, right and left. But also, what I didn't know, it aligns to your energy centers, the chakra centers that we spoke about in Reiki and energy work. Also, they each of the rings aligns to each day of the week. They align to the planets. So if you get stuck in a certain point, you can figure out what's going on. So I will be learning more about labyrinths, and I will be creating my own labyrinth. So that's my next one of my next little tools that I'll be exploring. And they are doing research now on people's brains. So as you walk the labyrinths, they are looking at your physiological responses. So I'm looking forward to seeing what comes out of that.
Wow, that's so fascinating. I love all of the prompts you use and all the analogies and all of the ways that what we we take so much for granted actually. All of these things are so accessible to us and actually makes a massive difference to in a positive way to our health and well-being. It's really
Absolutely.
fascinating to me. It's
Absolutely.
incredible.
So I highly recommend either walking a labyrinth or printing one out or looking them up. I will probably be attending this lady's workshop. She's down in Somerset somewhere, so I'll be going there. But I know that as a result of the work she did, the prison has now got a permanent labyrinth in one of their floor areas for the staff and the prisoners. It's harmonized. It's much more harmonized. The prisoners, there's less violence. They seem
Wow.
they've. She's also done work with hospitals. They've got them in the hospitals and in a local school. So I will be looking more into that as well.
Do you mean they have one of those tools you showed?
They're
Mm.
using the tools, but they've actually got one on the floor. They've actually painted one on the flooring.
Wow. Okay. And then people can actually sort of
Yes,
um
they can walk
walk
one.
through it. Oh,
Yes,
that's amazing. Um,
yes.
and in terms of, you spoke of chakras, and it reminded me of what you mentioned earlier around um, the elements that you kind of the fire,
Yes,
air, water,
yes.
and earth, and it reminded me of Ayurvedic ancient sort of
Oh, yes,
practices.
yes.
So, can you talk a little bit more about those kind of elements and like what you meant by that?
Sure. So the fire element is what gives us passion and courage to take action.
Mhm.
The air might represent how we communicate and our breath work. The water, as I've mentioned, represents our emotions and our intuition and what flows. And then the earth is what gives us the structure. So that would be your nature-based work, but it's also what gives your life and your work structure and foundation. So that's very simple. I go into a lot more detail when we do a session.
Amazing. And that was a really great summary. And if you could leave our listeners with a key message, and it doesn't have to be just one key messages,
Mhm.
what would that be?
Okay, so my key message would be get out into nature, look at nature, bring nature into your life and work in whichever and however many ways you can. Use all of your senses. And even if you just do it for a minute to 6 minutes a day, it will bring you benefits lasting a week.
Wow. That's brilliant. And that's so achievable, isn't it? From, even if you can't access the outdoors, you mentioned actually bringing nature to you. So yeah, that's absolutely fantastic.
So I want to just end before I talk about how people can get in touch with me with a lovely quote that I read and I use a lot at the end of my nature-based sessions. And I thought it'd be nice to end on this quote. So it's actually written by a lady called Emma Jane Cross, and her book is Walking the Wheel of the Year. And she says, nature is not cruel, nature is not kind, nature just is. The right way for you is your way. When you need it, nature is there to guide you. Whether it's the roots in the trees, the crevices of the stone, the foam on a wave, or the scent in the wind, you are part of nature. Nature is your wisest teacher, and you are nature's guardian. As she supports us, so we take care of her, so we can grow together, dancing to the rhythm of life and the heartbeat of the earth.
Wow. That was so poetic and beautiful. Thank you so much, Maria. How can people get in touch with you if they want? And we'll certainly put a link,
Okay.
yeah,
So,
out.
so
And
if people want to connect with me, I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn.
mhm.
My website is www.yourownTrueNature.com. So that's www.yourownTrueNature.com. And my Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn is all the same name. And as I say, if people want a copy of my recorded cup of calm, where you can get an instant cup of calm in 6 to 15 minutes using your favourite brew, or if you don't drink that, drinking your water, whatever it might be, and it comes with the doodle sheet, then you can email me and I'll send you my details. You can email me or just message me. Lovely to be speaking with you, Danuli, and I hope your listeners and your viewers have enjoyed some of the insights that I've shared.
I'm sure they
Fantastic.
will. And do
Well,
you
it's
have
been
any
an
other
absolute pleasure, Maria,
A real joy.
to have you on Function First Care podcast? And we would love to have you back here at some point in the future. If anybody has got any like comments or wants to know more, please, feel free to comment. And yeah, would love to have you back here in the future to talk more about what you're getting up to, and to talk about more about this space around, the amazing evidence-based elements that that nature-based therapy has on people.
Absolutely love to. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Danuli. It's been a
Thank
pleasure.
you. Thank you so much. Take care, Maria.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.